today's information culture, each day and every moment, there is an abundance of content, causes and platforms clamoring for your attention. Information is everywhere and instantly accessible. However, finding credible sources amongst the clamour can be both challenging and at times utterly confusing. One often thought of credible source, though, is the museum. People trust museums. People come to us to gain understanding and to learn about the world around them. In many cases, this trust is deep and implicit. For this very reason, as a trusted cultural institution, we have an important role of taking and processing information, providing context to this information, helping people understand what it means to them, and communicating this information to a wider community, both within the walls of the museum and to an online audience. Thus, the potential for museums to then act as a catalyst for change is incredibly significant. David Fleming, CEO of National Museums Liverpool, has said, "We have begun to redefine the traditional role of museums and to demonstrate the social and educational value of museums more coherently than ever before. We have begun to make use of cultural authority which ordinary people have perceived us to have. If we recognise that historically museums have operated as a voice of the establishment, reinforcing mainstream culture and ideology, today's museums need to participate in conversations, engaging with diverse communities and providing them with a public space where their voices can be heard. Museums of today should challenge perceptions and encourage new ways of looking, actively challenging that cultural authority." How is this done? How do we engage with diverse communities? How do we know where to begin or where to continue on to? How can we challenge perceptions without favouring one position over another? I put it to you and join with other museum professionals from around the world in saying it begins with a commitment to the promotion of human rights. As an organisation, Waikato Museum has in the past had strong exhibition and public programming that, among other community-based objectives, have explored the human rights of people within the Waikato community and abroad. These exhibitions have led to the development of a close relationship with the New Zealand Human Rights Commission and recognition from this organisation. Rohan Jadram, who is actually to the right of that image, of the Human Rights Commission, has identified the Waikato Museum as a high-value organisation because it has an excellent tradition of using creative resources and facilities to promote community cohesion, give voice to visibility, and recognise ethnic and religious communities and tangata whenua in the Waikato region. So far, so good. In fact, so good that in 2010, Waikato Museum became the first museum to participate in the Taku Manawa program, a nationwide human rights advocacy training program with participants from diverse organisations. For a museum or cultural institution, it is not unusual to become involved in different projects and collaborations within the community. What's different in the case of Taku Manawa is the way in which projects are approached and executed. Within Taku Manawa, participant organisations are encouraged in the planning of any project to intrinsically incorporate 6 elements of the Taku Manawa approach, which are 1, the linking of decision-making at every level to human rights standards. 2, identifying all the relevant human rights involved and balancing these rights to maximise respect for all rights and rights holders. 3, emphasising the participation of individuals and groups in decision-making. 4, non-discrimination among individuals and groups through equal enjoyment of rights and obligations. 5, empowering individuals and groups by allowing them to use rights for action and legitimise their voice in decision-making. And 6, accountability for actions and decisions. While these elements are more fitting for a social advocacy organisation, their inclusion into a museum-based program, I believe, is possible and can be successful. As a participant of this program, the first exhibition I worked with after completing Taku Manawa was the installation of the 8-week travelling show from Amsterdam, Anne Frank, A History for Today, that exhibited in early 2011. It was an appropriate exhibition for a human rights framework, yet it did not necessarily mean Anne Frank, A History for Today fit into a Taku Manawa approach, or was in fact relatable to the majority of our Central North Island New Zealand audience. This was especially apparent since the exhibition contained 11 static images and information panels that did not lend themselves to the action and interaction learning promoted by Taku Manawa. Happily, the museum added a second area where visitors could begin to have a participatory experience by walking through a blocked out space that was roughly the size of Anne Frank's room in the hidden annex in order to comprehend the dimensions of her entrapment. In the education programs which I oversaw, we tried to apply a human rights approach using role play and discussion cards to draw parallels between the discrimination and Frank experience and the types of discrimination faced today that are prevalent in the communities the students are from. Often in these sessions, some students would feel the need to share their own experiences of racial or religious persecution, experiences that many of their peers were either unaware of or had not thought of as damaging. These created memorable and moving experiences within what could have felt like a really static exhibition space. Each class was encouraged to leave a note. Visitors also recorded their thoughts, and a post-it tree of comments soon filled up and stretched beyond the parameters of the designated tree area with thoughtful and provocative statements and pledges, proving that many visitors were learning and thinking critically about human rights. Of course, the story of Anne Frank is immediately evocative and compelling to share, and of itself is a call to action. Applying the taku manawa approach occurred mostly in the directing of that call to action towards community or at-home issues. As a result, the exhibition, I felt, facilitated further human rights advocacy and understanding of the diverse nature of the Waikato community, highlighting racial discrimination and bullying, issues that many visitors discussed as prevalent in their communities. Now, not every exhibition will be so distinctly human rights based, and I recognise that the agenda of both museums and their governing bodies may have little room to consider social advocacy or human rights in its future planning. However, I believe that there is more room than we think, and there are more opportunities than we think, in which we can consider and apply the values of a taku manawa approach to our work. In things like the wording of text panels, the selection and placement of artworks and objects, the design of exhibition spaces, as well as in the education and events within our exhibition spaces. As a human rights museum, I believe this museum is on the right track. We've done wonderful things, and I believe we will continue to. I also believe we can do more to be agents of social change. Then when people come to us for learning and understanding, their baskets of knowledge will be overflowing. They'll be energized, focused, and primed to make a difference. 6 minutes is not very long to outline this idea, and I hope I have communicated the basic premise, but I want to finish with what I feel is a pertinent whakatauki. It is, ko te mana ka kai I te miro, nona te nahere, ko te mana ka kai I te mātauranga nona te ao. The bird that eats of the miro tree owns the forest, but the bird that feasts on knowledge owns the world. Thank you. Wow, that was perfect.